Hi, Rich. Thanks for joining today.
Great. Happy to be on. Look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So, author, speaker, and everything I've kind of known about you here and talked to you is really kind of diving into what I would say is kind of the power of prayer. I call it the silent voice. So, I do want to hear more about really kind of your view, your thoughts, and how you feel on the subject in a big way, and how it can really transform people's lives, and even maybe get to some of those initiant points for people or useful thought process. But I want to kind of start with the like a big bold question is what is prayer, or what is prayer to you? If love to start there.
Sure. Prayer, I guess most people probably think of it as talking to God, and that is true. I mean, I definitely think prayer is talking to God, speaking, whether you're just venting or complaining or asking for help or guidance or praying for yourself or someone that has either some challenge or illness. And so I definitely think of that as prayer. But I also think of prayer as just sitting with God as well, silent prayer. So many people don't maybe think of just sitting with God in silence at a deeper level beyond words or thoughts is prayer. And I do consider that too. So I think prayer is many things, but I think prayer is verbal, but prayer can also be nonverbal where we're just sitting with God and not speaking and connecting with God at a deeper level. And I think maybe many, I'll say Christian groups or even Christians of various denominations maybe forget that Jesus, didn't necessarily we don't think he always was babbling when he went off to be alone. We think he was sitting with God and just communing and sitting in silence. So the idea of silent prayer as prayer has been around for thousands of years and longer than that really goes into the old. So I think of prayer as talking to God, but I also think of prayer as just sitting with God. And maybe that's more, it's hard to think of it this way, but you're listening to God. You're letting God act in you beyond words and thoughts while you're sitting there.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting too, because while you were saying that is sometimes I can imagine people going into almost either wish mode or uh, requesting the adverse of something else. This is going on. So there's this, genie in a bottle, or, approaching it in that sense of the me and the I, and drawing in the silence and the power of silence. I know from times that I've had that call like meditation or just a silence, it's not calling it anything, is sitting still. Uh, those times bring much great ease and comfort, even to, into the mind, body, and the spirit, and just bringing the body, even slowing it down, bringing the world closer. And so I think, in a sense, too, when you're talking to people or working with somebody, coaching with somebody, do you kind of work through some of the ideas of it? And meaning that if it's kind of this like the idea of a genie in a bottle, like you're going to go pray, I just want stuff. I want. Because we, as humans, we sometimes tend to do things like that.
I guess I would think of it as, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But also, when we take the time to sit in silence, we create kind of a self awareness, and you can do that via journaling as well. You can journal for self awareness, and maybe we'll talk about it as part of our conversation. Is my method of practicing silent prayer is centering prayer. So that's how I sit. That's how I open to God in the silence is through centering prayer. But there's many different ways to do it. But what I've noticed about my practice is the fruits of my practice is really I become more self-aware. So maybe I might have initially been thinking this is what I want, but then if I'm journaling or if I'm sitting in silence and then after my centering prayer sit, I realize that's not what I want and this is what I want. So sometimes you think you know what you want until you actually take the time to be silent or even take the time to journal. So what you thought you wanted isn't necessarily what you want anymore, or you want a different version of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of taught me who I am, and it's helped me. It's kind of showed me the way forward. Like, what's next? What should I be doing? What things should I be trying? What are some things I should do to get out of my comfort zone? What's next for me? It's helped reveal that to me.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And when you were saying that too, I was kind of imagining times of where I come in like a real frenetic, or upset, or I'm emotional. And once I get kind of through that and allow that stuff to either subside, or I'm not focused on that aspect of as much. And then I start to recognize or realize, maybe I'm not upset about the thing that I thought I was upset about. there's another layer, or there's a season of life, or there's some other thing that was really kind of driving uh, the original emotion triggers or what have you. So I do like the way you brought that to the table with that recognition and the awareness. And are there do you work with when you work with somebody, are there kind of steps to go there, or is it really a fingerprint for each person on their path?
I mean, it's each person has a different path. So the people that when I look back at the different people I've coached, they tend to fall into 3 categories. It's kinda neat how that's happened, but one the first group of people is people that know that sitting in silence with God is valuable and helpful. They just don't know how to do it. They want someone to kind of show them, how do I do this, hold me accountable, and help me start kind of hopefully a long term practice. So the first type of person is just teaching them how do I do this, when do I do it, what's really happening. Then the second type of person is they've been practicing, but they think they're skimming the surface and there's no depth to their prayer
Mhm.
life, and they're not sure if they're really connecting to am I doing what God wants me to do? Am I connecting to my true self, the person God wants me to be, the actions God wants me to take? So they want to go deeper and discover who this person is. And then the third type, I've coached some clergy where they say, we recognize how valuable this sitting in silence with God is, and I want you to either teach me how to do this, or I've had some people say, I want you to hold me accountable to it because I need this time to reset and recharge. Otherwise, I'm no good to the people I serve at my own church. So I had one person that I was making sure he took a daily sit. And I was actually, with his permission, texting him and reminding him and kind of holding him accountable. So that was kind of the third group, which was kind of neat when I look back and reflect. So beginners that really just want some hand holding, people that are doing the practice but think I'm missing something. I'm not go. There's no depth. And then the third type of person is clergy who said, "Yeah, I need to reset and recharge. So that's do a couple sessions so that I can do that. Then I'm going to be better used to the flock that I serve."
It's awesome to really kind of be deliberate and intentional, or to that connection point and reminding. Yeah, I that's incredible with the one with the clergy too, because I think there's an assumption when somebody is really dedicated to, I guess, we'll call this a life of guiding others into a prayer state, into awareness, into the word, that they also need those reminders. Everybody needs a little
Right.
bit of help. And then on the other side too is interesting when you were kind of talking about that first group, it was almost like, and maybe it's not exactly how what it is, but it was almost like kind of getting permission or something, or kind of, am I doing this right, or am I? And it's interesting because there is no wrong way to do it. I think when you're slowing your connection point and you're truly there. I mean, I guess if you're sitting in again, the frenetic energy, but I think if you consistently do it, the practice will come through. And then
And
the
it's
middle one too is interesting because you maybe, and it's also too, it's just sometimes words are words, and the way I'm receiving something isn't maybe, but it was almost kind of like the depth. It was, and I guess that one in the sense of, maybe they're not. And again, I don't want to assume anything with anybody's things, but it's almost the connection, not necessarily feeling the depth of the connection. Maybe it's an expectation thing, that maybe there's a higher expectation or looking for the magic in it, and not seeing it, feeling it, or anything like that. So that's a very interesting perspective as well, too. With that, or do you feel that people sometimes have, I don't want to say too much expectation, or they start setting expectations on this?
Yeah, I think people do, and sometimes I might, and then I have to just take a step back. You want to let go of expectations. You just want to be open to the experience, because then that's where, as you said, the magic might
Yeah,
happen. Whereas if you're looking for something instead of just being open and letting, so you're really letting go and letting it happen, not highly focusing and on trying to make something happen. You really need, when you're just sitting in silence and meditating or practicing a temple of prayer, you're just opening to the divine within without any expectations, and then seeing what happens.
yeah. Where does, I guess this is, like I said, words are words. Sometimes people have a little different interpretation of things, but I guess words like surrender or the allowance or just letting go, these kind of terms and stuff like that. Is there a sense they're all kind of the same, or do you feel like there's some distinction, and is there a difference between surrender or intentional letting go and things like that?
I think you're right. I think they really are all the same. Because, for example, my practice centering prayer, I'll quickly explain it, is really kind of a letting go. And then I've heard some people say, well, we're really surrendering. I think, yeah, you're really doing all
Yeah.
surrendering, letting go. So in centering prayer, you sit silently with your eyes closed. Then to begin your silent sit interiorly, you introduce what we call a sacred word
Okay.
of maybe one or two syllables. Um, and that's it signifies I've begun my sit and I'm opening to the presence and actions of God within. And then as you're sitting there in the silence, when you begin noticing that you're engaging your thoughts, what I mean by that is when you begin thinking about what am I going to do after my sit? What errands am I going to run? Or you begin thinking about stuff you did before your sit.
Sure.
Maybe you had an argument or disagreement with someone before it, and you're thinking about that. Those are you're engaging your thoughts instead of just sitting there and opening to the present moment just as it is. So that's when you reintroduce interiorly that word, the sacred word of one or two syllables, to let go of those engaged
Mhm.
thoughts and come back to the present moment. And then you let go of that sacred word as well. So, at least in my practice, and there's lots of different practices, but in my practice, you keep coming back to the present moment. So, you keep trying to let go of your engaged thoughts with your sacred word, but then you let go of the word too. You're not using it as like a mantra that you're
Got it.
repeating. So, it's like a continuous opening to the present moment or a letting go, but as you said, even a surrender. I mean, you're kinda doing it all.
Yeah.
You're letting go of engaged thoughts. You're opening to the present moment. You're just surrendering your thoughts and opening to the present moment.
Yeah. I guess in there too, because I was thinking of the word allowance then, because then there's surrendering and then there's allowance and the essence of it. Again, these are just words. It's all, it's down to the semantics, I guess, and how we interpret it. But still, I guess in this sense, the allowance would be allowing information coming this way and then the surrender of it, of releasing it too. And I guess some of the thought process or the view, wherever you want to jump on this, is it an exchange or is it a state of being? And this is probably a big subject, or maybe it's not, but because I can kind of see feeling there's times where it feels like there's an exchange of like a conduit of the current, one way or the other. And sometimes it feels like a state of being that you're just present in within the all or within the isness of it. But do you have a kind of a thought of the allowance this way?
I guess with centering prayer, we're letting go of, which is hard to do, to like completely let go of thoughts, but sometimes you can't be thoughtless for a second or even more than a second. So I would say you're kind of opening to pure
Hmm.
awareness, in which you could really think of as God. I mean, I think of God as
Yeah.
everywhere. So I'm opening to pure awareness and kind of merging my awareness with the larger awareness and becoming one, even if it's for 1 second and then out of it, then back in it. So it's really kind of a letting go of thoughts and emotions that get in the way and then just kind of merging the two of us together.
Yeah.
That's how I think. And maybe if you'd asked me this, I've been practicing for 10 years. I probably would not have said that 10 years ago. I've got to the point where I think of it in that way. I
Oh,
also used to think of it when I first started that I was being filled with God's love. And then I realized, no, I'm not. God's love is already in me. I'm
there you
not
go.
being
Yeah.
filled with anything. I've become more aware of what is already within me.
Okay.
So I think everybody will have their own experience. So I'm at the point where I'm sitting with my consciousness, my awareness is sitting with the bigger awareness, bigger consciousness.
Yeah.
But maybe somebody else, they're somewhere else on their journey. So we're still both doing the same thing, but we're thinking of it differently.
And I do like the word emerging or emerging. I do like that because there's a presence. It's almost again analogies, metaphors, or kind of. But the thought of like being in the pool with it. It's all the it's completely submerged within you and you're it in that sense. Um, yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So now, I guess some of those things, those implementations, and we talked about, the centering and when you kind of do this and we're talking about a very, very beautiful, deep thing as far as like being with God, being with that emergence. I guess now coming back into this corporeal world, it's still all there. All the energy's there. We're all part of it at all times. I guess, you know, I guess then is there things that when you're working with people or speaking to people, because people are going to still come back to the wants, the desires, the things of this world. So is there kind of a I don't know if it's implementation as much or if it's kind of if it really is just the inner work and the inner guidance. I guess it's some of this is I'm even kind of as I'm talking, I'm kind of almost asking my inner self right now what that journey is, you know. And again, it's the different phases of our life, but there's, you know, there's the wants and the desires, there's the monies and the things that us as humans we kind of get wrapped up in and chase, but there's things of this world that do resources that do take care of us. So we, you know, people and health or love and other things than just the physical tangible. So connecting that into the world of the daily, are there practices or thoughts, or is it you know, as you come out, or is it just purely connect and then plug back into life? You know, a little bit of ask, just kind of open-ended thought process there.
I think of it as, I'm sitting with God, and I'm a big believer in affirmations. So, single sentence statements of things I want to do in various areas of my life. So I'll actually kind of read them to God before I
Mm,
sit,
okay.
and then I'll sit. And I think of it as I'm sitting in silence with God. I'm merging with God, and I'm just letting me and all of my thoughts and emotions and even affirmations brew with God. And then I'm thinking of it as after my sit, I'm getting up and walking with God and partnering with God. So it's not, God, I'll see you again later today when we sit, or God, I'll see you tomorrow if for some reason I'm not going to sit later. So I think of it as I sit with God, and then I walk and partner with God, and I'm letting go of engaged thoughts and returning to the present moment where God is. Some of the thoughts I might even be letting go of are, fear, anxiety, worry, lack of
Mhm.
confidence, and those types of things. So outside, so I think of it as outside of my sits, I'm still very much connected to this presence. And I'll do journaling, and I'll think, what does God want me to do? What actions does God want me to take? I think of them as my true self affirmations. And for me, my barometer is, one, it's excites me. There's an inner peace or calm about the affirmation, and it doesn't harm me or harm others. And if it gets me out of my comfort zone, that's okay, because that's the way I grow. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I
Does.
think of as I sit with God and let God act in me and pray in me what God knows I need, whether that's inner peace, calm, nudges to get out of my comfort zone, and that kind of stuff. And then outside of centering prayer, I act, but I also do some journaling, and I try to reflect on what should I be doing? Is there, as I said, that inner peace and calm and
Yeah.
excitement about it? And is it moving me toward growth? And is it not harming me? Then let's continue to move forward on it. But every time I sit, I kind of keep giving God back these affirmations and just let them brew with us while we sit. That's been my process, and other people probably don't do it. They have their own methodology or
No, that's
practice,
yeah.
but that's the way I think of it. Sit with God and walk with God. We're never apart. I'm sitting with God, but I'm still very much with God as I walk through
Yeah.
life.
And I like that a lot too, because that's where the essence of faith came in, and the fear. When there's the lack of the fear, the loss, lack or separation is when those things like lack of fear, you don't have that when you're consistently in these states. We don't carry that the faith. It was really the tie-in to that is that mitigates some of the loss of faith with the consistent.
It no, it I mean, it definitely does. A long-term practice of any type of silent meditation, contemplative prayer, whatever your practice is, definitely slows you down, calms you down, helps you let go of worry, anxiety, and connect and do things that you didn't think were possible. So, like, I think when I think of center prayer, I'm letting go of who I am not, which is I am not worry, I'm not anxiety, I'm not lack of confidence, and connecting to kind of my inner greatness, the things God wants me to do and has been waiting for me to do, and maybe has been very patient, been maybe waiting a year or
Sure.
more until I finally did something that I could have done if had realized it.
Yeah. I think too is even just the essence of that too is creating a potential. We're endless, we're limitless potential, and having those connection points, and just even having the understanding, the possibility, and the comfort, the ease of knowing that there's nothing that's I don't want to say hold me back or that I'm just trying to draw it. It's like it's right there, you know, because this is so big and it's such a beautiful subject. And I know that there's times of that kind of expanding the bubble of what's potential, what is true potential, what's possibility in my life, and those big, bold, beautiful things that I want to achieve or experience or just sit with. And those times living within that is the allowance. I'm not nervous. I'm not fearful. I'm not, and I'm going to act as if and not be as concerned with the imaginative, I don't know, storms of worries or self doubts in those.
Right. I mean, I've been practicing center prayer for 10 years, and it's definitely changed me. And so things I'm doing now weren't even on the radar screen 10 years ago. So I have a website, Silence Teaches, that was
Mhm,
not even on the radar screen. It has a weekly post. I do one on one coaching. That was not on the radar screen. I have a published book that came out in August of 2020, and a second one that's in draft form now. I do speaking. I've been on about 130 podcasts. None of that was on the radar screen. And 10 years ago, I would have been terrified probably to do all of it.
mhm.
So
Isn't that
the
cool?
power of silence and centering prayer and sitting with God has kind of showed me what I really was supposed to be doing. So I guess if I hadn't practiced centering prayer, you and I wouldn't be sitting here and having this
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely
And
not. Yeah.
I might be fearful and lack of confidence, and I would be holding myself back from doing the things that I was meant to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, does some of that, I mean, how do I say this? I think that some of those things that you had mentioned, is that kind of a flow state or those just came to you, or was it a divine inspiration, or was some of that stuff like, I want to do that, and then you sit on it and you achieve it, or is it just really just a mix of the experience for you?
You know, it's neat how it happens because if I look back and reflect on it all, centering prayer, I knew silence was powerful. I just didn't know what to do in the silence. So I came across a book called Healing in back in 2013, The Divide: Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots by Amos Smith. And I started reading it, and in it he talked about a practice he'd been doing for even 20 years up until that point called centering prayer. So that immediately intrigued me. So I began trying the practice of centering prayer for myself in late 2013, and then I reached out to him on
Oh,
his
cool.
website
Yeah.
and emailed him some questions, and we began like a back and forth dialogue. And we're actually friends to this date, and we talk about once a month. He's on the East Coast, I'm or on the West Coast. But as we became friends, he asked me to work with him on his website, so I did that, and I helped him with some of his social media. And then he said, "You need to write a book." So he actually planted the idea, and he had that book published, and he was in the middle of writing a second book, and he said, "All right, you have your own post coming off my site. You're helping me with some social media. I think you need to write a book and share your experience. You've just started this, and you have a lot of neat things you probably could say." So he nudged me to write the book. And then on my own, I thought, "Well, I probably won't need my own website." So then I created a website. I think it was about 2015, and I just let it evolve. I had a weekly post going off of it, and the same post was going off of his site too. And then I thought, you know what? I think I'd like to try to coach people. So I just put a coaching page, and I had a few people contact me, and I began coaching. And then I'm like, maybe I could speak. I don't know. Well, no, actually, the speaking idea was at my church I was at. That was back in Pennsylvania, I'm now in North Carolina. But a woman just approached me who had left the church and was at another church. And she said, "I know you practice centering prayer. We have an adult faith group. Would you like to come talk about it at one of our Thursday night meetings?" And I said, "I guess so." I mean, I've never really talked to anyone
Yeah.
about it. So I put together a little presentation and did it. Then after I did it, I thought, I now have a presentation I could replicate it. So I began sharing that. Was able to talk to me via Zoom in front of their group. I added that to my website, like a speaking page. Things just kind of naturally, either I thought of it or someone just approached me. You need to write a book. And then I ended up writing a book. And then this woman said, "You need to come to our church and talk to us about it." Then I realized, well, I could probably talk to other churches about it. So it's a little bit of both, a
Yeah.
little bit of me and a little bit of other people just coming to me and asking me a question or nudging
That's
me.
cool because it's some of the synchronicities in
Yeah.
creating your own surroundings kind of feed into it. Because there's other things too that some of us feels so, I don't want to say hard, but it feels like you gotta doing the grind and chugging up the hill. But when you do tap into those, I don't want to assume anything that all that stuff you just listed was easy or not easy, but when you're really kind of tapped into it, there is an ease of the environment or the divine inspirations that kind of come through it. And I'm not going to speak for anybody. I'll speak for myself as the example. There's sometimes where it's even too for me with this podcasting personally, it felt like it's been a calling. So much of it sometimes felt like a chore or really difficult to get going, and obstacles and resistance. And it was like, is this right? And you kind of have those times, but then you start to have these connections eventually, and I think there's can be different courses with things. Maybe feels a little bit where there's resistance, and then you get into the allowance and is this doing the right thing? And then you have some beautiful conversations with dozens of people or hundreds of people, and you start to kind of see it and feel it. And I'm not saying that there's any structure to what I just said, but it is very interesting how these things can kind of form. And I think some things can be forged in fire in that sense, maybe is what I'm saying. And there's some things that can kind of come through the ease of openness. I don't really have a question there. It was really just kind of that thought process.
No, I would agree on all of what you said. And sometimes you just have to be open. Like, for example, I have a weekly post that goes off my site, and I could be thinking, oh my God, I got to write another one and turn it into drudgery and pressure. Well, actually, lately, for about 6 or 7 months, I've been actively journaling. So in the morning, I'll just journal. I'll just open up my laptop and type the date and just start typing whatever I feel like typing. Sometimes uh, I've read a book and it created an idea that I'm going to journal on that. Other times I have no idea what I'm going to journal, but I go back to my journal and I journal Monday through Friday. I give myself the weekends off most of the time. I look back at my journals and a lot of my journaling has turned into a post. So now I don't worry about posts. I have them because I journal almost 5 days a week. I'll look back at my journals and say, oh my God, there's something really good there. I can tweak it a little bit. And that's a post that I'm going to send out on Monday. So you just kind of let stuff like that happen. And then even with the book, the second book that I'm writing, I, I knew what kind of wanted to write in each chapter. But then I also went back and looked at my weekly posts off of my website and started pulling stuff in from there. And I did the same thing with my first book. You can really find a lot of stuff in places if you really just let go and allow it. There's a lot of at least for my weekly posts, I could use them anywhere. And then I did some videos at times. I could repurpose a post and do it as a quick Facebook live. And then I even repurpose them and sometimes and download the video and put it on YouTube as a 7-minute video on a topic. You can be really creative with things, and what you thought would be drudgery is actually right in front of you, and it's always been right in front of you, if that
It
makes
does.
sense.
It does. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can kind of identify with that. There's times that I have ease of process with this, and there's sometimes too. I still, it's not that like things like this with the podcast personally is like this is I love this. This is great. When we try to do a individual video like you're talking about, or form some of the writing around it, or be consistent. There's times where I still kind of have it feels like a little bit of a trudgery, but there's those moments where I'm like I get to do this instead of I have to do this, and then create kind of breaking open some of the ease within that, understanding that this is the gift, this is the joy of getting to do this versus the requirement or the expectations in that arena of making it on the rigid side of it. Yeah.
No, I would agree.
Oh, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to ask you about the journal. We kind of had a couple questions about the journaling and stuff like that too, because after you're in active prayer, because it's sometimes kind of automatic journal. I mean, you mentioned typing because I've experienced as well as journaling in these states of meditation or whatever somebody's going to call it is kind of the automatic journaling. I've tried that or imagery coming through that. And you really kind of just, whatever the word is that somebody's going to say, somebody might call it channeling, somebody might call it centering and the automatic journaling. So in that sense, are you coming through with this emergence and into that, or is it a separate thing, journaling and writing?
It is separate. So, like my centering prayer, usually I do first thing in the morning, like kind of right after I wake up. And then my journaling sometimes is an hour later, or sometimes it's in the middle of the day. I'll stop because I work from home. I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll just journal. So it is separate. But in a way, I'm just kind of letting go and seeing what happens. Even the writing process. Actually, I was writing my second book. I would even just take a 1 minute silent sit and just say, I'm letting go. I'm opening to you. God, what do you want me to write on these pages? And I love you. I surrender to you. Then I would just sit for 1 minute. I set a timer for 1 minute, sit for 1 minute. Then I would begin the writing process. And that's how I began. Each time I wrote the second book, I didn't do that for the first one, but for the second one, I did that.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm opening to God and letting God flow through me. But even when I wrote the first book, I really enjoyed writing. I thought of it as I'm just letting go and letting God and I together put the words on the pages of this
Yeah.
book. And I think of the same thing with the posts that I write for my weekly posts. I guess I'm at the point where anything I do, I think if it's helping and serving people, then it's a good thing. If I look at the post that I'm going to send out, if I think it's going to help and serve people, it's a go. If I don't think so, well, then I need to tweak it. And the same thing with the book. Am I helping and serving people? Anything that I do on a podcast or any of my coaching, I want to be helping and serving people and keep that um, mindset.
Does some of it too ruminate and what I'm going to try to ask is some of it just for you and some of it is just for sharing? Meaning that maybe there's these beautiful ideas and you maybe felt like, oh, this isn't right now, or I either have to work on it, hold it, put it on the shelf later, or some stuff just comes out and it's just uniquely yours? Or do you feel like you're just kind of this open fire hose that whatever comes out, you sharing? Through
Through
this
like
centering, you're merging and you're pulling in all this information with your writing, with the sharing. But do you find some of this just uniquely yours? Meaning that are these, or is I almost feel like you're just more like an open vessel of any knowledge, any experience that you're just sharing. There's no holdbacks.
yes, that's what I think. That's where I think of it as I'm in sync with God. We're in sync and together moving forward and taking the actions where I'm in sync with God. I guess exactly that, the latter that you said.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's me, it's what I know that I'm being asked to do. So if it was just me and I begin feeling guilty about it or nervous about it, then maybe I could put the pause on it and say, this isn't me really. Maybe this is my ego, or this is
Okay.
me trying to show off or
Sure.
something. Let's put a pause on it and let's rethink what I say, what I do, what I write.
Yeah. And that's some of that's too, like, creative thought process too. I was gonna say some of it can't be in a vacuum when it's pure, when it's essence. I don't feel like, and the reason I asked if it was some of it, there's a sense where it's just yours and uniquely yours. Cause sometimes people create things like music, art, and it's just theirs uniquely and it's not necessarily shared with the world. But when
Okay.
it's some of these thoughts or trains of thoughts, I believe that because I've talked to a lot of different types of artists and things like that too, when it seems that's pure, the sharing is like, it's not even, and that's how you responded. It was like, of course I'm going to share. It was just kind of like, no, this is just me sharing for the world and the vessel of the knowledge that's coming through. But I did like that you said, if something doesn't feel right, you didn't say this, but I've experienced this. If something feels a little bit like, I don't know, I get like metal or rigidity or something like that. It's like, maybe I'm in my ego. And I know that sometimes, or what we're trying to do is, just wanna manufacture something where maybe we wanna not, I'm not putting any thoughts or words in your mouth, but manufacture something where we feel like, oh, our audience or the people that are reading this, they just want to hear it. It's not necessarily unique creation. And I think we need to create things that are just pure from us and it'll resonate effectively.
No, I would agree with that. So yeah, and it's more of am I saying something or writing something to show off, or am I doing it to help
Yeah,
people? And that you have to. That's more of an inner knowing. It's more of an inner knowing.
agreed.
I mean, I hopefully I'm not, and maybe everybody probably once in a while does show off and wants to say, "Look at how great I
Yeah,
am," but I try not to do that. I don't wanna do that. I just wanna help and serve and or share something that maybe I've done that I'm proud of. That way people and show them what I did in case someone else wants to replicate the
yeah.
process. So, it instead of showing off, it's more of like, I'm really proud and happy of this and what I've done, and now let me show you what I did in case it will be helpful for
Yeah.
you.
I think there is an essence of that, and it does take some practice to get there. The way I see that is kind of walking through the door first, helping people to give that permission to themselves. It's not even us sitting here talking. I really don't think it has anything to do with you and me. This is us just sharing ideas and thought process to kind of spark something in the allowance or somebody else to maybe walk through that door too and be like, hey, it's time to share. There's genius, there's connection in there. And I believe that, leading by the example of it, it's not necessarily like you are sitting here boasting, like, look at how smart we are. It's the sense of us being like, hey, it's okay to share. It's okay to tell stories. It's okay to talk about ourselves. And that can be hard too for people, is kind of talking about ourselves, thinking that we're being boastful or how cool we
Right.
are. And in all honesty, what's the funny part of that is when you really put yourself out there, I think there's times because you've been on a lot of podcasts, there's times we say stuff that sounds like a genius. And there's other times we say stuff that are like, oh man, I can't believe it's, it's kind of that, everything in between. But if you're willing kind of in that pure state to just share, overall, the message resonates. I really believe that.
No, and I think everybody needs a coach or mentor just someone who's a few steps ahead of them. I mean, that's my first book I written because I had someone nudge me and then mentor me on the process, and then coaching. I coach people that are a few steps behind me, and I have a spiritual director, and he's 10 years ahead of me, so to speak. So I think everybody needs a coach or a mentor. There's always someone that's a few, even one door or many doors ahead of you that can help you faster than you can help yourself. I mean, you can try to do things yourself, but it might be easier to get some help.
So I wanted to ask you about your book. So it's Sitting with God, a journey to your true self through centering prayer. So I guess, you know, who is your true self? The essence of the true self in that title. Like, can you expand on that a bit more?
Yeah, they do. True self is kind of the person God wants you to be, the actions you want to take that maybe you are afraid of. So centering prayer helps me let go of who I am not and become who I can be. Because when you're sitting, you're letting go, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, your fear, anxiety, worry,
Mhm.
stress, uh, and then opening to your true self behind all of that. These are all barriers to your true self. So your true self is things you want to do, but maybe you're afraid to do. You lack confidence. I'm too young to do that. I'm too old to do that. I don't have enough experience to do that. I don't have the right skill set to do that. When the truth is, you do, and you are the right person, and you just need to take the next step, and then the path will reveal itself. You don't need to know every single step. You just need to know the next step. And that's kind of what happened to me. I didn't know how to write a book. I took the next step, and the path became more clear. And Amos was a great mentor. Um, and then even with all the speaking I've done, you listen to other people and model what other people do, but you just have to take the next step. I didn't know how to do a website. I just created it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just let it evolve. And I began adding pages and just tinkering with things. So your true self really is just probably the person. Most people probably know who their true self is. They just are scared to try to do that, to be that person and do that.
Sure.
So instead, and they'll look back 10 years later or 20 years later and say, I wish I had. I think a lot of people can look back and say, I wish I had, but I didn't. And that's probably your true self, the person you were afraid, the things you were afraid to at least try to do. And then many times we might try to do something and it doesn't happen, but then it seems to open up another door and that works. You discover that that's what I was really supposed to be doing all along.
Yeah. I think those paths and channels, as they reveal themselves, it can be an incredible adventure. We think we're heading in a direction, and there's other doors and windows that get revealed to us. And it's kind of like, oh, I had no intentions, or I didn't know that this was even possible. And you find yourself somewhere completely different. But if you're too rigid with the path or you're too fixed on something, you might not see those things. And this is probably where that silence, that center, and the listening and connecting will help with that allowance of sight.
Yeah, I mean, the more you take to just be, the better you are at doing. It sounds like a paradox, but if you can learn to just be, then you're better at your doing. If we're always doing and consuming, we're not reflecting and planning.
Yeah.
So I think everybody needs silence. Then even the journaling, and it was something I wish I had started many years ago, but I didn't. I really haven't been journaling other than the last 6 or 7 months. I've been pretty active with it, and it creates self-awareness that I learned so much about myself and who I am and how I feel and what I should be doing. So the better you are at just being in silence and then even taking the time to journal, the better you will be outside of those practices because you have a more of a sense of purpose, more sense of intention, more sense of a direction other than getting up and doing the same thing every day and looking back in 10 years to say, nothing's changed. I've been doing the same thing for 10 years. I haven't grown. I haven't done anything. But if you take the time to sit in silence and meditate, you take the time to do some journaling, and then you reflect back 5 years, 10 years, you're probably going to see some major, you don't think of it at the time, but you might look back and say, oh my God, look what I've
Yeah.
done.
And well, which is also too, even having gratitude and the recognition. Cause I've sometimes people don't kind of give that the weight of the gratitude of where you have become from. Sometimes that gets taken for granted. I know that there's times in life where you look back at that person 5 years ago, and if you were to that person 5 years ago and see who I am today, they'd be like, "Whoa, they've done this or that," and but then today impatient or I'm, caught up in my head on something. And, there's points of those appreciations where you come from. So, I'm not going to say it's always easy. Maybe it is for you at this point, but there's those times where we have these human experiences too.
Yeah, and gratitude, like, probably almost every night, I like to drop to my knees and thank God, and I just will recite small, medium, big, anything that happened during the day that I want to say that I'm grateful for. A cup of coffee, the walk I took, the time in my car ride with my son for 20 minutes taking him to
Yeah.
school, anything. I just like to reflect with gratitude on anything that I can think of. And then I also like to kind of think of it as forward. Like in the morning, I'll say, I'm grateful for what I'm going to get done today. So I like to plant the seed that great things are going to happen today. I'm grateful for the productive day I'm going to have. So I like to look at gratitude that way. At the end of the day, before I go to sleep, I want to fall asleep with gratitude, with being grateful for all the things that happened that day or I experienced. But then in the morning, I like to just say, I'm grateful for that. I know I'm going to have a productive day. Today's going to be a great day. I'm excited for what I know I'm going to get done. Here are three things I really want to get done, and I'm grateful that they will get done. And I'm grateful for any experience that will happen today. So I like to think of a gratitude in those two manners, at least at the present time. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll be doing it differently, but that's how I'm thinking about it now.
That's incredible. So when you were kind of saying that too, I was thinking of have you, I want to be careful how I ask, but I was going to say the word impatience or patience after, doing your practice to this stage. Have you worked through that impatience in your life or, having patience? I mean, or is that not even a thought to you at this point as far as the recognition? Because I personally, there's times I definitely am impatient with the process. So, uh, where do you kinda feel about it, the word or the impatience or patience?
I mean, I think I've gotten better being patient because sometimes you have to let things brew, and sometimes you have to be patient and let things play out.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes you want things quicker than they're ready to happen. Sometimes you want an answer right away and you get it, the next morning or in a week and everything worked out fine. So I guess I've gotten better at slowing down and trying to be a little bit more patient when I want something and things aren't going the way I want them to go. Sometimes I have to pause and say, maybe I do need to continue being a little bit more patient because I either need to give that person more time to do it, or maybe now's not the right time for this to happen anyhow.
yeah,
And if it happened in a week, everything will be fine anyhow. So I guess I've gotten better at trying to be more patient when to expect things to happen, more patient with people and realizing that people are different. And that just because I would immediately react and respond doesn't mean that person's going to do the same thing. Like to realize everybody's a little bit different and handles things differently. So I guess I've learned to be more patient because of my silent
yeah,
practices.
yeah, I 100% is out of our control as well, and I think that depending on where that hits, I think sometimes we can see things as resistance, just allow this thing exterior of us to play out a little bit. See, we're taking that silence, that's really power of which we're talking about here is the centering prayer, in those moments as well with the patience.
Exactly. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So, I think really with with the book, um, is there, I guess I get kind of putting it out there. Is this really I don't want to say the end. Is there another iteration of this for you? Is there an evolution to this for you? Or is it just kind of this, um, where you're going on? I'm trying to think exactly what, where's the building process for you in all this? Is there an end or is it just some type or just the essence of being? Is where are you at now with your life in that sense?
I would say it's a journey. I mean, I connect to my true self through centering prayer, but there's no end point, and that's what makes it fun. So my true self is not an end point; it's a journey. My true self was learn center prayer. Then it became have a website. Then it became not only have a website, have a weekly post, and then do some coaching, add coaching to it, do some speaking. Then it was publish a book. And then it was add a resource page to your website and do some affiliate marketing because there might be some neat products that can help and serve people. I guess a journey, not an endpoint. It's just a journey
Hmm.
of what's next and what else should I be doing? What maybe needs to stop? I have to be open to that too. Maybe at some point it'll be like stop doing affiliate products and add this, or might be stop speaking and do this. But it's definitely a
Yeah.
journey. There's no end point. That's what I want to be sure I'm open to. What should I be doing on this
Yeah,
journey?
I'm always amazed too when people put a lot of energy and effort into something. I remember I had one guest on and she would do a lot of retreats, and she's just like, at some point it called to me to just stop doing those. She's like, I was very successful at them. People were upset that I stopped and everything like that. So there's times like I kind of think of the term of cutting anchor, or, people in business that are just set there, literally cap their growth pattern because they don't want to overextend themselves. And I do find that, that is a very interesting discipline. Maybe there's a better word, but you had said maybe there's a time where you stop doing it. Maybe there's a time where you are, okay, there's a bigger calling or there's a different calling for me. And being able to have the courage to do that. And maybe it's not, I don't know, is it even courage at that point, or is it just listening to the voice?
I would say it's listening to the voice and what is most important right now. And then if you realize I have five things going on, but these one or two or three are really more important, you have to stop doing the other things. So I think it is having courage because sometimes you maybe become complacent and you're doing things because you know it's been easy, but that doesn't bring me joy anymore, and that's not what I feel called to do anymore. But like I'll even equate that to when I worked for the same company remotely for a long time. I knew it was time for a change, and I was 56 at the time, but I was like, well, I know how to do this, and this is easy. I'm just going to stay here and hang it here for the next 10 years. Why would I want to have to do a resume and put my stuff on LinkedIn and start applying for jobs and then have to navigate a whole new company? So for a couple years, I was complacent until finally the pain of staying there was more painful than the pain of leaving. And I finally did. Actually, I found a new remote job about a year and a half ago. I absolutely love it. And I'm so glad I had the courage to do it. But I guess there was an inner knowing, and my wife was nudging me, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was ready. I was ready for the change.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I guess you have to be ready. And I guess for me, it was the pain of staying
Well, no,
was
that's,
harder than the pain of leaving.
yeah, no, I mean, you nailed it there too, because that's people do become complacent, and sometimes, like, kind of said earlier, where it's just forged in fire a little bit too, and you don't want it to get to a point where then it turns into a chaotic crash or something like that as well, where it's uh, there's a time, there is a timing to it. So I did want to ask you about coaching as well. I think there's finding a good coach. There's a lot of coaches, mentors, programs out there these days, especially online. We have access to so much. And I think it's finding that, or finding a good coach or a good mentor. I guess I don't want to say that it's hard, but I think sometimes navigating that, there's a lot of noise out there. I'll just say, and for people to kind of find the guidance in there, you got some advice or thoughts and kind of helping people to navigate those waters to find the right person or people to help them.
Sure. And I think many of my coaching clients, they read my book. So what
Mm.
they read resonated with them. They liked kind of my vulnerability and transparency, and they liked what I had to say. They naturally came to my website and then reached out to talk about one on one coaching. But I guess I would say, and even then, I'll usually have a complimentary session and we want to make sure we're a right fit. So I guess the best advice is, yeah, obviously you want to find a coach that you resonate with, and you'll probably want to have at least a 30-minute discussion with this person and talk about what you're trying to accomplish, what kind of help you need, and see how that coach coaches
Mhm.
you. And if you have a complimentary session and you don't feel that you're being guided well, you'll know right away. You'll probably reach out to someone and say, this is the help I'm looking for. And then if the person on that first complimentary coaching session really can't help you, obviously they're the wrong person. So at least that's my
Sure.
approach. I don't expect people just to sign up for a session and pay and off we go. We meet and we talk, and I ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? What kind of help do you want? And I ask a lot of questions, and then I listen to them, and then we just go from there. And then at the end of it, sometimes they want to schedule another session right away. Other times they want to take time to think whether it's something they want to continue with
Yeah.
me.
I agree. And I think that's really is important if somebody's seeking help, finding and helping to identify what they even need. Not everybody even knows what they're looking for in a sense too. But I think go with your gut, go with your instincts. You're going to feel a resonance if there's a connection.
And I need to know because I might hear something and then I would say, you know what? I'm not the right person for you. I'm hearing what you're saying, and perhaps you need a therapist. I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there that's beyond what I can help with.
Yeah.
So that's important for me to hear and listen to because I don't want to offer my help to somebody if I don't think I can help them either. And I've had that happen a couple times where we've talked and listened, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't think I'm right for
Yeah.
you. I don't think I can help you. I don't want to take your money because I think somebody else that has different skill set could help you, and that's not me, not the more I listen
Yeah.
to you.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because that was my follow-up question too, is that not everybody is coachable either. I think
That's true, that's true. Not a you're right, and there's that too. You might get the inkling that this person really doesn't want coaching yet, so I don't wanna charge him and have him pay
yeah.
me when he's really not ready to do the work.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because you guys aren't gonna have success, together in that co-creation of the process. So, yeah, how can people find you and, work with you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. The best place is just to go to my website, silenceteaches.com. When they come there, if they subscribe, they'll get a free ebook on centering prayer if they want to learn more about it. So that's the best place. It's just silenceteaches.com. And if they want to subscribe, they'll get a free ebook. And then from there, they can further explore my book on my website. If the free ebook kind of spurred their interest, come there. That's the best
Awesome.
place to find
And
me.
we'll also tag you and connect you with social media as well too, so people ideally find you and work with you. So, thank you so much for joining today, Rich. This was a pleasure.
Great. No, thanks for having me on. And hopefully, this was helpful for your community.
Absolutely.